Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar from TriStar. My name is Thiago Palaniappan. Today's topic is going to be on the Creo Unite technology as to how it allows a better multi-CAD collaboration. We will be recording this webinar, so you'll be able to access it later on. Right now, everybody's on mute. You can start typing in your questions in the questions area, and I'll try my best to answer your questions towards the end of the presentation. I would encourage you to download the handout. There's a handout section in this webinar. There's a data sheet on Unite technology and the collaboration extensions, and I'd encourage you to check it out. It's a PDF that you can download as you watch this webinar. Those who are not familiar with TriStar, we are a company that specializes in helping manufacturing companies adopt software systems and processes to enable better and more efficient product development, right? And we do this by being one of the largest worldwide value-added resellers worldwide for PTC, right? We are headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and we do have our team spread across the United States and Canada, and we specialize in Windchill PLM implementation. We do have custom solutions as well. We are also certified PTC training partners on all the PTC products, including Creo Parametric, Creo Simulate, Windchill. So that's a quick overview about our company. I planned on having just a quick overview initially on what is Unite technology and demonstrating with an example as to how it helps with the multi-CAD collaboration that some of you may be currently already using, or you're looking to be more efficient on how to do both concurrent engineering and collaboration, especially when you have multiple CAD systems in the company, or maybe when your supplier partner is vendor sending you some files. We'll also go over what are the supported CAD formats. This is something Unite technology itself was introduced back in Creo 3, and there are some enhancements they did over 4, 5, 6, etc. We'll also go through the data exchange version support as to what versions they support to bring it in via the Unite technology inside of Creo, and how do you repurpose or edit them once it's inside of Creo, right? You have a non-Creo file inside of Creo, and how do you edit them? And you can do some geometry edits. We'll talk through that, and some general tips that we'll go through that on just based on my experience. What are the good practices and some best practices on how to handle non-Creo files in Creo, and what to look out for. A few things we'll cover towards the end too, including a little bit of the import data doctor, import validation, things like that. So, and then we'll have a Q&A session. I'll try my best to answer the questions towards the end. Unite technology itself, if you think about it, there are 4 key aspects, or I should say 4 key capabilities. When we say Unite technology, it's like import, open, automatic update, and save as, right? This was introduced in Creo 3.0, and the import and open is more for consolidation in a multi-CAD environment, right? So somebody's sending you a native file. It could be a SolidWorks Inventor, CATIA NX, or Solid Edge file, and rather than bringing in a step or an IGES or a neutral file, Unite technology allows you to directly open those native 3D CAD formats, right, inside of Creo, or assemble it into your Creo assembly. It's not bringing the feature history, it is bringing the assembly structure and the geometry. You have a couple of ways of doing it: import versus open. There's a difference between it. I'll talk about that in a bit here. It allows you to keep that native file as is without converting it. That is, the open allows you to have that native format file as is instead of Creo assembly mode. And then you can continue with your design. You probably build some cross-platform design intent. And then let's say you get an updated file of that non-Creo file. You're able to make those update those changes instead of your Creo assembly using this Unite technology, or using something called collaboration extension. Some of them are included in the Creo Design Essentials, but the last two capabilities of automatic update and then saving out your from your Creo assembly, saving out a SolidWorks or a CATIA or NX save as, that's both are included in the collaboration extension license that is kind of included in the new Creo Design Essentials, especially the SolidWorks and Inventor. So there are collaboration extensions for SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, etc. So the first two are available pretty much in any package starting Creo 3.0, import and open. The automatic update and save as will require the collaboration extension. And we'll go through some of the enhancements they did or the later releases, but it was introduced and been there for a while starting Creo 3. Okay, so you don't have to install any third-party tools or anything like we used to do it in Creo 2 and prior. It is a major enhancement from a technology standpoint done by PTC back in Creo 3.0. Now, just to kind of demonstrate or just talk through the difference between import versus open, if you were to import, let's say, a non-Creo assembly, like a CATIA or a SolidWorks assembly into Creo, what's really happening is whenever you import, the system is converting every single object, that part or assembly, everything into a Creo format file immediately, right? So that's what used to be the traditional process, of importing, right? But then the open, when you use Unite technology and say instead of importing, if I were to open that assembly, it kind of allows you to maintain that native file format. So you're not creating another business object to manage at this point, right? You're just assembling a CATIA assembly or a SolidWorks assembly into Creo, and you're not converting every single object. Maybe you might be making changes to a couple of objects or items inside of that SolidWorks assembly you may wish to change. So what happens is when you show your intent to change one of the components inside of that assembly, at that time, Creo is going to do more like an on-demand conversion rather than a conversion of everything, whether you need or going to edit it or not, right? So this is a much efficient process, allowing you to more like manage your from a file management standpoint. You're just looking at managing the same business object inside of Creo, and you're not creating multiple files. Like you don't have to manage the incoming SolidWorks file as well as the convert Creo file, right? Once you convert it, yes, there's it works. There is a wrapper file that PTC creates behind the scenes, and it can be managed both inside of Windchill and as well as if you don't use Windchill, if you're probably just in managing files using in your local disk. It works both ways, but the goal of open compared to import is to ensure that you are maintaining certain files coming into the incoming assembly as is, and then converting as required, or only if you're showing your intent to edit that, right? So it's a much more efficient process there. Now, collaboration is more like, you may be importing all these SolidWorks NX and CATIA files into Creo, right? Or opening, I should say. But then what happens, like you're doing your cross-platform design intent where you keep adding geometries or you edit some geometry using some geometry edit features. You're kind of building some references or relationships in the Creo assembly using these multi-CAD data. What happens if that original source data get changed in the source CAD system? So I got for a week from now, they're sending, updating that SolidWorks file that I am using. Now I'm supposed to be using that. You don't have to undo everything and redo. You're able to do something called this update, wherein I'm going to demonstrate this with an example. But this is where the collaboration extension comes into play, where it is going to it's going to review all the non-Creo files in your assembly, and it's going to check what is out of date, whether it's inside of your PDM system or whether it is in your local disk. And you're able to update the geometry and any other changes you may have done, that you may have created some new features or you may have created some relationships, or all those are also going to be updated depending on the change you did, obviously. So this is the workflow is, okay, you consolidate this multiple multi-CAD environment in your company by bringing them into Creo. At the same time, you're able to do collaboration where I'm now able to update my Creo assembly with a newer version of that original file they sent us, right? So we are able to do with the collaboration extension is required for that, like CATIA collaboration extension, SolidWorks collaboration extension, and it is included in the newer design essentials packaging, right? So and some of them are purchasable as well, some of them may not be included, so we'll talk through those as well in a bit here, but that's the key. And now having you are working on your Creo assembly and they're asking for the file in their native format, maybe in SolidWorks or CATIA or NX, you're able to do a save as from Creo and send it back to them, and they could work on it. And so that's the whole goal of this collaboration extension, where it's allowing you to update the original non-Creo file if there's a new version, and right, you're able to update your Creo assembly. At the same time, you're also able to save out or save as SolidWorks or CATIA or NX and send it back to them, and so that they could work off of in their environment. So that's the key capabilities of the collaboration extension instead of Unite technology in there. So speaking about the cross-platform design intent, imagine an assembly where you have Creo parts, Creo subassembly parts, right? As you can see, you have Creo subassembly and parts inside of that. You can also add additional, open or assemble non-Creo files, those two gray parts that you see in here, and then you're able to build those cross-platform design intent because it's geometry, right? We're not doing a feature-to-feature conversion. However, we do have the geometry. So the geometry ID is there, so we are able to build some relationships between them, use it for maybe downstream, applications like Creo Simulate, for example. I'm doing an analysis where I have an assembly in the multi-CAD format, wherein I may have some parts in Creo, some parts in the SolidWorks format. But if they make a change to the original file, I'm able to use a collaboration extension and have it update. There could be some geometry that's dependent on that other geometry. I may have done some flexible modeling edits or FMX edits or geometry edits that would update. So that is just to give you an example or a high-level overview of what exactly is the Unite technology. It's really allows you to quickly work on non-Creo files, bring it inside of Creo, make some changes and build some geometry and design intent at the same time, allowing you to update and save as, right? So that's the key capability in the Unite technology in here. So just to give you an example here, this has been there since Creo 3.0. So I have, I'm just running a quick video here to show you where I have an assembly, a typical Creo assembly, where I have a sub-assembly that I've activated, and I'm bringing in a CATIA part right now, and I'm assembling it, right? So I'm not converting it at this point. If you see the model tree of my sub-assembly that's active, it has the .cat part, right? It has the cat, and now I'm looking to assemble a SolidWorks sub-assembly, right? So that's what I'm assembling right now. And when I assemble these, I could use constraints, your geometry constraints as always, or your datum planes, right? So right now I'm just applying a coincident constraint in there, but I'm also selecting my datum planes in my SolidWorks subassembly and my Creo subassembly there. So I'm really building that cross-platform design intent here and building some relationships in here. So now I'm going to open, and I'm not importing, I'm just opening or assembling an NX file. So I'm just working on the native file directly here. If you expand the native file, you're going to see an import feature, but no feature history, obviously. And you can also assemble solid edge assemblies. That's the last one that I'm assembling in here, and then use a couple of Creo assemblies there. So, and you can manage these, the way, how do you want to import them? There are some import profile editors we'll talk about in a bit here. But here you could see that I'm using geometries and datum planes. You could use coordinate systems. Maybe if you do top-down design, you may have skeletons, locator skeletons for your coordinate systems. You're able to use all that inside of Creo Parametric. So that's what I'm doing right now, where I've picked a couple of geometries within that subassembly. And if you want to maintain your design intent better, I would encourage using skeletons too. But here I'm assembling the cartridge subassembly here, which is a Creo subassembly that I've assembled. So if you look at my final assembly or the subassembly there, you have right in here, if I could just zoom in here, there is my Creo top level assembly, and then there is a subassembly, a couple of subassemblies in there. And then these are, you can see with the icons that they are maintained as CATIA subassembly. There is my SolidWorks and Solid Edge, as well as my Creo assembly, right? So that's what, I would call that as a true cross-platform design intent, example there. And I'm able to make changes to them, and, using flexible editing, and I'll show you with the live demo as well. But just wanted to give you a quick overview of what Unite technology allows you to do at a very high level here. Now, so just to reiterate again, we're not really adding, you're not doing any type of additional installations here. All you do is install Creo, and then you're just saying, I'm opening, do a file open or file assemble, and you're able to import or open those non-Creo files into your Creo. And it doesn't matter whether you are using Windchill PDM Link to manage files, or some of you maybe still be using file system. It works in both use cases, right? And then I'm going to point you to some PTC articles that'll help you get more information as to what versions are supported. And if for some reason it's not opening, maybe you don't have a supported version there, or maybe you got to update your Creo date code. There could be quite a few things in there. So I'm going to point you to some articles too that may help you as you go through this process there. Now, when you install Creo itself, the converter libraries are automatically installed in Creo, so you don't have to do any additional installation per se. Obviously, if you didn't have, if you had an older license, the collaboration extension is not included, and with the newer licenses, they are included, or you may have to purchase that depending on your licensing. But the file open should work, right? As long as you're in Creo 3 or later, right, it should work in there. And this is the direct open that I was talking about, where you're doing more of an on-demand conversion as required. You're having to manage less business objects, when you're doing open versus the import. And you can also manage all these or do some settings where you can use import profiles specific to SolidWorks files or NX file or a CATIA file, just like you would use for a step or IGES or a neutral file. You do have the option to control it with some profiles to automate. For example, I may be bringing in a SolidWorks file that has multiple bodies, and Creo supports multiple bodies now, starting Creo 7. That would be a setting that you could turn on and save it in your profiles, right? So those are some of the advantages of using Unite technology there. You're able to manage the changes as well, right? So here I have a situation where I have a notification about one of the assemblies, or maybe one of the SolidWorks assemblies or the CATIA files are out of date, and I'm able to update that with that collaboration extension, right? So that if I had the SolidWorks collaboration extension or the CATIA collaboration extension, I'm getting a warning here telling that I do have these as outdated, and I'm able to update that. So I'll demonstrate some of these in a demo here in a little bit once I'm done through these slides. You could also save as finally, right? When you do a save as, you get the option to save as a SolidWorks file or a CATIA file or an NX file. And again, this is part of the collaboration extension license capability. So I talked about what is Unite technology, but what are the supported formats currently? So you could see that CATIA files, NX, most of the other CAD system files are supported right now. The import and open functionality, wherein you're either doing the conversion if you do import right away, or if you open, you're letting it live as that native file inside of Creo, right? That's what you're doing. Autodesk Inventor files were not supported initially in Creo 3 and 4 for the open. You'd had to convert it, right? There was no open option, but starting Creo 5, they've improved that as well, right? So, and then the update and the save as, right? That would require the collaboration extension there, right? So some of the other formats like JT, if you're using the Siemens Teamcenter JT, that's a viewable, lightweight, viewable for Siemens. And if you'd like to import them or do a save as from Creo, that would need the interface for Creo JT Creo interface for JT license, obviously, but I'm just talking about the Unite technology as to what are the supported formats in here for import and open, as well as the update save as to what is supported in there. So this should kind of help you. And they're also available in the PTC website. For more information, feel free to check out the knowledge base, and they'll have more information on these supported formats. Now, speaking about that collaboration extension itself, the new Creo Design Essentials package, the new base package of Creo called the Creo Design Essentials, in fact, includes the collaboration extension for Inventor and SolidWorks. It's part of that T1 package, the base package in there. So if you already own Creo Design Essentials, many of you may already have that. That means you already own the collaboration extension for Inventor and SolidWorks. So you're able to do that automatic update and save as, right? Apart from the import or open, right? And then there are collaboration extensions for CATIA, right? For NX, as you can see here, that's kind of included part of another of a higher package in there, or it could also be you could also get those separately. If you don't see the benefit of having in there on the entire package, on the top level package there. If you're just going to be bringing in NX files, that's the collaboration extension, right? Or updating and save as mainly. So those are just on the licensing, and you might be interested to know what versions PTC currently support when it comes to multi-CAD collaboration using Unite technology. So here's an article from PTC that I just grabbed before the presentation here. You could always go to CS134024. If you search for that in the knowledge base, you will see the updated one. But here you see how they do say if Unite technology is supported or not, right? So CATIA, Creo Elements Direct, right? For example, those are supported, as you can see here. So when I'm bringing it in, what versions in Creo 4, what versions do I support, right? And it'll also, anything in red is like newer updates that came through with the later date codes of 5020, for example, those versions are supported. Same thing with Creo 5, 6, and 7. And then, for example, you may want to know for SolidWorks and Solid Edge, what are the versions we support, right? Do we allow exporting or importing of AP242 for step files? All those are kind of listed in this table, as you can see here. So for SolidWorks, what support we support 2020 if you are in M140 of Creo 4, for example, right? Similarly, for importing in Creo 7, looks like it has started to support SolidWorks 2020, starting the later date codes of 7010, 7020, and 3. So this is something that I'd encourage you to go to the PTC's article here at CS134024. That'll help you and understand it, better, or at least keep up to date with the newer changes, right? Typically, I've heard from PTC that when SolidWorks or NX or CATIA come out with a new release, it takes about roughly 3 months for PTC to kind of update their DLLs, right? The converter libraries inside. So that's the time frame that typically it takes. So maybe in a newer date code, it'll be supported. So if you open something and nothing happens, most likely it's due to an unsupported format that I've seen with many customers that I've helped with. Just a few other things, related to this multi-CAD collaboration and in bringing in geometry or files from other CAD systems or even neutral files. It's just some general best practices and tips that I thought would help if some of you may not be aware. Over the years, PTC has been bringing, many files like import validation. It's just there, like import data doctor has been there for a long time during my industries. I'd used it to fix gaps and things like that. But when Creo 4, they came out with this import validation where once you import or open file, you're able to go do an import validation, wherein you're able to, it gives you a quick report on the volume, the surface area, right? It's able to do a solidification check, which you can choose to ignore, right? Depending on the use case, do you really want it to be a watertight model? Do you want to use alternate mask properties, and do you want to get into repairing it immediately if it's a neutral file that you may have brought in instead of the native file? You might have some more gaps, for example, relatively speaking. All those could be looked up front, where you just go to the part, right click, and there's an import validation option here, and you can just quickly generate a report that was introduced in 4.0. So you're just kind of how it looks like. If there's any problem in there, you could even have your notification settings set up in such a way that it gives you automatic notification if one of the import validations had failed. Okay. And then another thing that I personally like is the connection tool to inspect geometry, where mainly useful for surface models in here, where once I bring in the model, or it could even be an existing Creo file. Generally, it's useful where I would go into the inspect geometry connection tool, right? Once I check my curvature and all that, I'd really like to see, before I get into deep dive on curvature and other types of analysis, I'd like to see if there are any gaps, first of all, right? So that's checking for G0, right? So as you can see, I can check for position, tangency, curvature, continuity, and acceleration. So, and I can select each one of them, and it's going to highlight here, for example, it's telling the green edges are tangent, but the red ones are not tangent, right? So similarly, what about position? Do I have a gap? On a very large, complex geometry, it's very quick and easy it gives you a high level overview, similar to the validation check. This has been there for a long time too, but it's kind of helpful there. But Unite technology is also, supported instead of Creo View. You can read more about that in the article CS66813 that gives you more information. So when you do a file open in Creo View, you do have the option here, as you can see, to Creo Unite, and it could be the NX parts. That is, NX has the same extension as Creo parts, right? .prt, that's that .prt, that's NX parts, SolidWorks files, CATIA files, right? Inventor file assembly and parts, etc. Right? So you're able to bring that in to Creo View as well. And speaking about Windchill itself, it's got to, like I said, Unite technology is supported both with Windchill and as well as without Windchill, right? You're able to support both. It creates a wrapper file, and they're kind of managed in both cases. But when you, in starting Creo 4, PTC did make an update where, without the need to have a work group manager, you're able to manage, check in, check out those non-Creo files through the Creo workspace, right? I mean, we strongly encourage that you should be using that specific work group manager, like SolidWorks work group manager, or that specific CAD systems work group manager. But starting Creo 4, you are able to at least, there might be some limitations in there, obviously, but it's you're at least able to open, the file. Let's say somebody sent you a file, you bring it into Creo, do a file open, and then during check-in from your workspace, you're able to put it back into your common space in there, and it is possible, right? So that's starting Creo 4. PTC kind of made that enhancement there. But we, again, as always, PTC recommends using the SolidWorks Workgroup Manager, just so that you don't run into any limitations per se, right? And again, there are a couple of very good articles in PTC's website that kind of goes over this in a little more detail. I'd encourage you to go through that, specifically on how the Unite technology interaction works with inside of Windchill PDM Link, right? When you bring in a file, non-Creo file, there's a .creo wrapper file that's created, but how is that managed and things like that, right? So there's some configs to manage that. So all that is kind of listed in these two articles that may help. I just listed it in there. In the interest of time here, we'll keep going, just to show you some examples too. And finally, once you bring in the file, how do you make changes to it, right? So that's FMX, flexible modeling extension. Some of you may already have it. It's available in most of the base new packages right now. You may not even have to purchase. It's already included in the old Creo Essentials and the Engineer packages, as well as the new Creo Design Essential packages, right? So what it does is it doesn't care about the source of the CAD geometry, right? It doesn't care whether it's coming from SolidWorks or it's coming from a step or IGES or whether it's a Creo file itself. All it does is looks at the geometry, are able to do some recognition like cuts and bosses, etc., maybe pattern recognition, mirror recognition, and then you're able to make changes to that, right? So maybe you want to recognize a round or the fillet or the hole size. It's better than spending that time recreating that geometry, right, or the feature from scratch. So FMX itself, you activate the part or open the part and you say, okay, I want to do some shape recognition here by selecting the geometry, maybe apply some rules and quickly select all surfaces with a specific radius or all convex or concave geometry, as you can see, and I'd like to make an analytical edit to that geometry, right? So rather than a feature edit definition that we're all used to, we would be doing a geometry edit, right? And you can do move, substitute, right? You can do pattern, symmetry recognition, and etc. So I'll show you with an example in here. So before I move on to some of the other general best practices in here, let me kind of switch to, before I move on to the second half of the presentation, I wanted to just open up Creo. If I could open up an assembly here real quick, I'm going to open, let's see, I have an assembly that has some non-Creo files already in there, but I'm going to assemble, let's see here, to one of the sub-assembly, right? It's a race car assembly, got the chassis, suspension, and let's imagine this left corner sub-assembly in here. I'm going to open that as well. This is currently a Creo assembly. It does have some NX parts. It has some IGES parts in here, some NX parts already in there. But right now, let's say the brake rotor for this wheel assembly is being done by my partner company that specializes in a different CAD system, and I'd like to assemble that into my assembly here. I'm going to go, you can, from starting Creo 3, when you do a file open or when you do a file assemble, right, you do have the option to, other than your usual step and IGES that you may be using, you do have Solid Edge, SolidWorks, Inventor, NX, CATIA. You could see all this has been there since Creo 3.0, right? All you need is just Creo 3 and later, right? If you're in Creo 2, yeah, that's when you may have to use some third-party converter tools and all that. But starting Creo 3, this is basic capability regardless of your licensing. You should all be able to open this. Now, we strongly encourage trying out the native file compared to the step or IGES, and I'll explain that more as to why that happens. As a general best practice, right? It's your chances of getting the data through is higher when you use a native file instead of saying, okay, let's have SolidWorks export a step or an IGES, and then I'm going to import that into Creo. So it's almost like you're kind of using a middleman here, and there's going to be data that's get lost both times, or as they export and as I import, for example, or as I export and they import. So if they are willing to give the native file, it's a good practice to use that directly, right? Because we could do that starting Creo 3. So if you're not aware, so most of you may be aware of this, but so here I have an assembly. And I'm going to assemble the SolidWorks file. So let's say I want to go into here, and I'm going to just say, I do have a sample SLD PRT. You see the file extension there. I'm just going to open that. So as you can see, I have a couple of options here when I bring in a non-Creo file. I do have the option to import or open, and the difference is essentially, do you want to do the conversion from the get-go into a .prt, or do you want to maintain that SLD PRT as is? So that's one of the key capabilities in the Unite that we recommend using the open, especially when you bring in an assembly. You just open everything and maintain it as a SolidWorks assembly. And then as you show your intent to change, that's when the system will ask you, okay, these are the files we'll have to change, you see. So right now I'm going to hit open, and it's bringing in the file. And let's say I have a config option for during assembly telling that whenever I assemble, comp assemble start config pro, that will automatically put my part geometry on my cursor, right? It's whether it's a Creo file, it doesn't matter. So right now that's why I have it on my cursor in there, so I don't have to spend my time moving it around, right? So that's if I go to file options, and if I go to my config editor here, I have a config option set up called comp symbol start, and that's it to move in place that I personally like. By default, if you hit default, it's just going to be somewhere out there depending on the size, and then you'll have to bring it in and all that, right? Or some of you may prefer considering a separate window, but that's just the config I use. That's why it came up automatically on my mouse cursor. And as you can see in the model tree, the key capability of the Unite technology here is it is able to still maintain it as these are Creo files. That's a SolidWorks icon. You can see that it's a .sldprt, right? And I'm able to go and just use my the cross-platform design intent that I was talking about, where I'm just aligning the holes in there. Maybe I want to go, let's just move a little bit closer here. Maybe I want to go and just grab those geometries and make it coincident. So I just did a regular assembly constraining, just like you would do with a Creo a native file. I'm just, with a Creo part file, I'm just doing it with this SLDPRT right there. So I'm able to save this right now, check into Windchill. I'm able to save it out as a SolidWorks file. If I need to send it back to them, I could do those things, right? So right now, but let's imagine at this point, I'd like to make some changes to this. I want to go through the scenario of how I might want to update this, make some changes, and I'm going through my design process here. At the same time, I'm going to get maybe another file from them, the same file that was updated, and how would I update that to show you that key capability of the collaboration extension here, right? So let's say I'm going to activate this part, right? I need to do some recognition here, obviously. So I'm going to select the SolidWorks part and activate that guy. And once I activate that, I'm able to go into flexible modeling here, right? A flexible modeling capability was introduced back in Creo 2.0 by PTC, and they acquired a company called Co-Create. Many of you may be familiar with them, with that. It's heavily used in Europe, and it's a completely direct modeling software where it doesn't have history or no features, right? It's geometry edits. So that capability is included inside of Creo, and it's technically editing. That's what we'll be doing here. We just call it, they're just calling it flexible modeling. So all it does is shape recognition, right? Geometry search, and then you're able to do some modifications. That's pretty powerful in there, right? You're able to do move by dimension, offset, modify analytic, right? You can edit rounds and chamfers, do some quick substitute, kind of like the replace command, and you're able to identify patterns and rounds, right? Remove geometry, etc. there, right? So in this case, I'm thinking, this was done in SolidWorks, so I'm able to select it. It clearly tells you right there, right? It's from the SolidWorks part in there. I'm going to go select that geometry, and I have the option to do some recognition here, right? So I could say, okay, allow me to select just the entire cut, right? It could be a very complex geometry too, and it picked up that geometry, and I'm able to do a little pattern recognition here. And what it's doing at this point is it's recognized a pattern, right? It just said, do you see a pattern in there? And I'm able to edit that. I can go to, allow edit, and I can really, right now they're all grayed out because it's not editable, but I can go edit the patterns that was done in SolidWorks right instead of Creo, right? So I'm doing some recognition. I didn't make any change as of yet, so the system doesn't care, right? It allows me or lets me leave it as SolidWorks part at this time, right? As you can see, I've just added a pattern recognition, right? So similarly, maybe I want to go with this guy here, and maybe I want to select that also as a cut, and then say, okay, let's do some pattern recognition, and there it is, right? So I have a couple of pattern recognitions done. And now I'm thinking I may have to, I'd like to make some changes to this too, right? So maybe these cuts in there, they're probably the wrong direction, or maybe I need to make some dimensional changes or change the diameter of the hole. All that could be done, right? I can go modify analytic, and I can change that right now, right? Now, for example, I may say that I want to go back to that cut in here, and I want to just do a move by dimension or move by drag, or as soon as I show my intent to change using one of these tools, right, the system is going to come up with a little warning. This is like a timeout, right? Hey, I allowed you to maintain the SolidWorks file so far as a SolidWorks file because you did not make a change. But right now I'm intending to change it, and that's when the convert starts, right? So this is the one I was talking about where you bring in a large assembly, you're able to maintain everything in that SolidWorks format, and on demand you convert it, and which is a much efficient process than bringing in everything, converting it, and then you may or may not change depending on your use case, all of them, right? So that's a better practice in here. So I'm going to convert it at this point, and at this point it is going to convert automatically. I can use some advanced conversion tools where I can specify a different name, etc. But I'm going to hit convert, and right now it is a .prt file. So I see that has a little import feature. It's no longer the SLD PRT. So with that, I'm going to go, let's see here if I could go back to the same geometry in here. And I go to the cut geometry in there, and I'm going to say, let's just do a move. Now, just to, and I could have given a specific angle or dimension, but just to quickly show you, and before I make the move, I don't want to be moving one by one and spend my time, right? There has to be a much efficient process wherein I've already recognized a pattern, so could we leverage that? Absolutely, right? So I'm able to go and say, let's just go with my pattern recognition, right? So I have the pattern recognition, I'm able to go to options here and say, we did some pattern recognition here. Let's go select that first pattern recognition. So what it did was, for my chain that I'm going to do right now, it's able to use all of them. And as you can see, I'm making the change on one geometry. And since I did the pattern recognition earlier, it identified that, and it pretty much propagated that change to all of the other geometries. So same thing I could do, say I want to do modify analytic, and I can change the diameter of that hole, or radius in this case, right, to some, and I can, same thing, I could say, okay, I would like to use the pattern recognition, and I would like to change that, and maybe, so whatever size I want to, I'm able to make it larger, smaller, maybe, so it's more like you are able to make some basic geometry edits, and at the same time leverage these this well-known CAD tools like Pattern. There's a reason we all like patterns, to make that change on all of them quickly, right? That's a biggest advantage in there. So I'm able to do that. So I've done a couple of recognition. I'm doing some move, and those are all features, right, that can be edited. So that move itself is a feature right in there. Now I'm thinking I should probably be assembling, let's see here, a bolt in here. So just say a fastener. Let me just open this, and let's say we want to put it somewhere in here. I want to go, say, this one to this one in here. Then maybe we'll just went a little bit closer and add a couple more constraints. There it goes, and now I'm able to go and pattern that, and you see how it's following that recognized pattern, and I'm able to pattern that too. So this is, just to give you a quick example on the cross-platform design intent I was talking about, right? We brought in a SolidWorks file, maintained it as SolidWorks, and then showed our intent to change it, converted it, and then I've done some recognition, etc. Right? So at this point, let's say I'm getting a notification from or an email from my partner telling that they did change. I mean, let's say I've been working on this for a week with this geometry for this assembly, and now they say the original import model is changed now. It's no longer the same one, right? So I have another model where I kind of removed some of these geometries, outside geometries in there. So to kind of mimic that, so let's say if I go to my, I'm going to go to my one of my folders in here, just to kind of give you an idea. Let's see if I go to, there it is, right? So if I go, this is a file, this is the folder where I've been working on, and as you can see, the .creo wrapper file that's being created, right? Since that's what happens behind the scenes. I told you that, right? And now I go to my SolidWorks updated file. I have another file of the same part name, right? So I'm just to kind of mimic that during the demo, I'm gonna put that updated one right on here. And I'm gonna, just replace it in my file folder here. And how do I check that inside of my assembly, right? So I go to operation, and ATB stands for, some of you may be familiar with this, associative topology bus, right? That's useful for whenever you bring in imported geometry or non-Creo files. I want you to check the status. So it's going to analyze the entire assembly, and it's telling me that, okay, the SolidWorks file that you have is different. It's almost like, compared to the one you have in your Windchill versus what you have in your Creo session, you need to update that. Similar, I'm just mimicking it using my file system here. And what I could do is I can just go do an update. So since I have that collaboration extension, I do an update, And if you watch this assembly, before I hit update, let me just zoom in here, right? This is the file I have, right? And it's a slightly different one. I'm gonna go ATB and do an update and say okay. And it's, as you can see, it's erasing the files I had in session. And you see how it switched to that part, applied the changes I did later on, right? You see, it brought in initially that slots were in the other direction, and then it changed. So I didn't have to lose all my work that I did, the cross-platform design intent that I keep mentioning. That is still intact, right? I didn't have to re-import and everything. Again, it depends on what change I did. Now, if they had made some changes to those, then I may have to redo some of those, and they may have failed. But the advantage here is you're still continuing to work in Creo and still able to update that source CAD file, right? If that changed in their CAD, in the original CAD system in there, right? And now they may ask me to send this file back, and I may just go save as, export this as a SolidWorks assembly in here, right? So there's I can go send this as SLD ASM, where essentially it's going to pick up all the .prts into SLD PRT, all the ASMs into SolidWorks assembly, and I could send it back to them, right? So that's just to kind of show you that the 4 key capabilities of the Unite technology: the open import initially, and then the update when I did the change update, and when I'm doing the save as. That's what, that is when the SolidWorks collaboration extension is required in there, right? Let me get back to a few other things that I wanted to touch on. So we talked about editing and everything. So now, generally speaking, some of you may still be using I should say neutral files, right? Like step or IGES, and this just a few things that during my industry days I would be using, and that is quite useful, and most of you may be using. So there's always this question about which file type should I be bringing in, right? It just varies, it depends, I would say. But then, are there any general recommended tips on these areas, right? So what profile should I be using and things like that? So first of all, whenever possible, we should be using the native file if you use Creo 3 and higher. Let's say you're using Creo 3, 4, 5. Most of you are probably using Creo 4, Creo 5, 6, or even 7, right? You should always be bringing in the native file or requesting them if they could send you the native file, because we are able to open that, right? So that's better than the second point in here where I have like 2 steps. Do you want to directly work on a Creo file, on a SolidWorks file instead of Creo, or would you rather have them do this first conversion, or I should say, they're exporting it and then you're importing it in here? So what's really happening is data gets exchanged 2 times, and there's it's obvious that it's going to lose some geometry, depending on how complex the geometry is going to be. So we want to avoid that, right? So I'm not saying that native file import is going to be perfect, but again, you may have to test it out. Depends on the geometry. But with the Unite technology, when you do the open, it's supposed to be much better than the conversion, because you're really not converting it. But of course, once you do the import or make a change, it is converting it, but it's still better than using this so-called middleman that you're all used to, step and IGES. And I used to have better luck with step than IGES during my industry days when I worked on these non-Creo files. But is there a priority, right? What file should we be using? What are the general priority? I'd say the first step is, if you have a native file, try that, right? If not, yeah, step, Parasolid, IGES. I would argue, IGES might be better, and Parasolid is better than IGES, but it varies, I guess. We'll have to just test it out depending on the geometry you get. Maybe it's a very complex surface geometry, or maybe a prismatic geometry. If it's step, could we leverage the newer versions of step, like AP242, that comes with the MBD and the product manufacturing information, right? Data, the annotations. So those are the things we got to think about. But we should always see if there's a native file. Let's try that first, right? Step itself, as you know, they have been, Step itself it has gone through a lot of versions in here over the last few years, and the latest one, AP242, is something PTC is supporting starting Creo 4.0. Especially for MBD, model-based definition. It's very huge, wherein you're able to add those annotations, or MBD's the step AP242 version is able to hold those. So regardless of what CAD system or which CAM system it goes, or it could be going into some inspection software or in manufacturing software. The AP242 is able to carry those MBD information that you created inside of Creo. So it's more both for export and import. We recommend using these different the AP242. If you are in 4.0 and later, you would be able to set that up. In fact, when you export, you have an option even in Creo to export. I'm pretty sure the other CAD systems also have the same option. So you can request them to send a higher version step file in there. And just a few tips in here that some of you may or may not know. How do I know the accuracy of the incoming step file, for example? And try opening that step file in a notepad or WordPad, and you'll see a little uncertainty measure with the unit. It's kind of giving you an idea about the accuracy of that incoming part and the unit system, all that. If you open Notepad, you'll get a few information there. And one thing I've usually seen customers do is they bring in an imported file, and all they have is just no planes, no coordinate systems, and no start parts, right? The reason for that is you're just doing a file open and you're not using an import profile. When you use an import profile, you're able to specify the template. You're able to use your own start part. So essentially, I might use the TriStar start part that as a company we use with our parameters and predefined views and what have you. But then I'm also ensuring that is I'm bringing in the imported geometry. So if you don't want to just get a compared to look at this one here, right? All I have is import feature, but here I have my datum planes, my coordinate system, and then the import feature. So if you forget to use that use templates when you bring in, right? When you bring in, there's a use templates option. That's all it takes, and it picks up the template, or just you can pick your own template in the import profile. You can even save that profile, or you could just go get data. You can create a new part, get data, and import it after the fact. So I'm going to create a new part using my start part, and then I can control the import, right? So there's a couple of options there. There are also some settings that we strongly encourage. There are also configs for it, but in the import profile editor, when you're bringing in a geometry, I'd like the software to try and heal or close the gaps as much as possible, so that's always a good practice, right? So you could say, okay, join surfaces from different layers, solidify closed volumes if possible. All that you can tell it up front, right? Maybe you may have multiple bodies in there, and you could just import multi-bodies into one part, so especially in SolidWorks has multi-body. Creo also supports multi-body, so you could say, I would like you to bring all those as one part rather than an assembly. You're able to control that right in the topology, and all these could be saved, right? So in fact, there are specific import profiles for each file type that you may choose to import or export. So for example, a .dip_sw would be for a SolidWorks step. NX, there are different file settings in here. So now they've consolidated all that with the newer releases. You may have seen, you just go to your file options and data exchange, and there you have different import profile settings. And this could be saved. You could also have all this in a single folder. So real quick, if I go to my Creo and go to options, and I say data exchange, I'm able to just say, for example, okay, when I import, these are all my import profile editors, and this is my export profile editor. So maybe whenever I export the step file, I'd like to have a specific version in there. So I go to step export, and I could say, okay, it should be AP242, for example, right? Wherein I want to include my PM, my annotations also, right? So all of those are going to be added, and I'm going to just do an export, right? You want to export it as is or tessellated? Is it going to be a single file? Export and assembly is a single file, or separate parts, separate, thing. All those can be saved in here. Or when I go import, like I want to import the SolidWorks files in here. So for SolidWorks, when I import them, I always want them to make sure that when they have multiple bodies, import them as one single body, right? So I could do that. Or if it's one single part, right, always make sure you join surfaces from different layers. And these settings are always helpful. So most users just, when somebody sends a stepper and I just file, all they do is, file open, and then they probably just go to, let's see here, if I could open up some files in here. And if I go all files and everything, right? So there is, right? And then some file, and then click OK. And what happens if you don't set up any of those settings? is that's when, you know, all the issues happen right now. Is, as you can see, it's taken a while here, but I don't have my datum planes, my views, whatnot. So a better practice is when you do the file open and when you select that all files, for example, right? So I got that. I'm able to go import, and I'm able to go to this profile, right? If you already had it, it would have picked up the profile. That's where I could say, okay, try to join everything if possible, right? By default, right? You know, try to close the gap between surfaces or repair and satisfy geometry, things like that, right? You could have it do. There are so many advanced options that you should try initially. You know, there's just some general tips in there. And use templates. That's the key, right? When I'm bringing in a part, use a part template. When I bring in assembly, use an assembly template, and so on, right? So when I do that, I'm going to already have my datum planes or coordinate systems, etc., right in there. So let me just go switch back to Creo real quick while it's doing that. There it goes. That's a good practice to use those import profile in there. So they're all under data exchange and import profile editors in there. And one quick note, I mean, import data doctor is still there. I mean, you are able to go, and if you've not used it, it's a task-based repair tool, I'd say, that allows you to do some automatic fixing and manual fixing. It's usually a hit or miss, to be honest with you. Sometimes it takes just a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's longer than that, right? You know, there are some techniques in there that can help if you did get a geometry that is having a gap in there. But again, you got to think about, should we be spending minimal repair effort or maximum repair effort? It depends on, are you worried about mass property calculations? Do you really need a watertight model without the gaps, right? Maybe you might just be using it for space claim or keep out areas and what have you, where all you need is a surface geometry, right? So you got to think about that. Or if you may be using it for some simulation, you do need the exact, you know, the full solid in order for it to mesh. In that case, you may be spending some additional time there. But when you bring in, if you redefine or edit definition, any import feature, you're going to get into that IDD environment. And what it allows you to do is it kind of breaks that import feature into multiple surface geometries. And you're able to go and say, search for gaps or slivers, and I would like to close it. There are some search tools in there that might benefit you trying to repair it, or you manually, you know, sometimes, you know, you have spent enough time where that repair just doesn't work, and many times you just probably add a boundary blend or surface to close it, right? So there are some options. This is nothing got to do with the Unite technology, but if you use the Unite technology, hopefully, you know, your time on these traditional methods that you may have used in a multi-CAD environment are going to be, you know, reduced, right? So you're hopefully going to get a much better geometry. You still have this option, right? You're able to still go into import geometry, and you're still able to change those. For example, I go into this one that it came through that I imported, but as you can see, now I have my datum planes, I have my little views, and I have my start part. In other ways, you create an empty part. You create an empty part in there, and all you do is you simply go get data and import. That's even a better practice, where all you're doing is you're saying, I'd like to import this into my part, or into my start part, right? It's a couple of ways of doing it, and you can always go to any of these parts, right click and go import validation, and ask it to give you some reporting in here. I can go look up the settings. So some couple of nice options in there, right? So let me just go back to this one here. So all right, so with that, I think we are right on time here. Let me see if there's any questions in the questions area. Let me just go through one by one here. Okay, let me just go through one by one. Okay, the first question is, can you shrink wrap a native external CAD file that is not imported into Creo? Great question, Vito. Yeah, you should, as long as it's under your Creo umbrella or assembly file, it is a geometry that we can recognize, right? And so the answer is yes. The next question, the WGM plugins allow SolidWorks, Inventor, Solid Edge, CAD to be stored in Windchill. Does the Creo Unite also rely on the WGM plugins to do the open and pull the model into Creo? Yeah, so the answer is no. Starting Creo 4, Mike, you don't. The thing is, without the WGM, the system is able to just manage that as a CAD document. But again, there are limitations in there, and we strongly recommend using the WGM as much as possible. But starting Creo 4, there was a major update by PTC that without without the need for a work group manager, I'm just like the workflow that I showed you. I should be able to do that inside of my Creo connected to Windchill. Yes. If I assemble a SolidWorks from my hard drive file to my assembly in my workspace, yeah, okay, and then save it, it adds the new SolidWorks file to my workspace, but I don't need a WGM to import the file. I don't need a WGM workgroup manager to import the file into Windchill. Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Just for that basis. But again, we have to. There are limitations, and we strongly recommend using Workgroup Manager to get all the relationships of the other 3D CAD system file that you may be. You may have a group in your company or maybe another business unit that's using Windchill to manage the SolidWorks file. So we strongly recommend using that Workgroup Manager, but for Unite itself to function, you don't need it, is what I'm saying. Yeah, just the basics at least. Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Next question here would be, I assume that purely using open, not import, does not allow the use of a start part template. Is that correct, Chris King? That's a good question, Chris. You should, yeah, when you do the, whenever you do the, whether you do a file, see, when you do the open, and like I did with that SolidWorks file, right? It didn't ask me for any type of import profile. Yeah, you're right. So it's the only thing is in what you got to do is before doing the import or open, best practice, go to your data exchange and then ensure that you set up a SolidWorks profile, right? So you set up a SolidWorks profile, and this is because clearly it tells you that the profile is for import and open. So that's a very good question, Chris, in there. So you got to go instead of doing the profile on the fly like I showed you during the import. When you do the open, you got to make sure that you set up this up front, right? So you say, okay, let me go to my SolidWorks import one. I say, okay, I always use these .prts and .asm as my start part. I may be doing, okay, import them as multi-bodies if it come incoming SolidWorks files, things like that, right? And I save this profile, right? And I save this to something in here. We'll just call this as a demo in there. So it's what it's doing is it's really saving it as a .dip.sw, right? As a dip.s_sw file. SW stands for SolidWorks, obviously, right? Now that it's saved in there, I should be able to go to my SolidWorks listing in here. Let me just cancel out of this guy here. And I should be able to go browse to that demo _sw, and this would, I can always export this to my config and all that. But the next time, every time when I use that workflow that I showed with that example, I know that it's going to bring in my start part. So that is kind of how you would do it, Chris. Hopefully that explained that answered your question there. Let me see. Let me see if there's any other questions. Just give it a minute here. I think we're almost. Yeah. Let me see if I missed any of the questions. I think pretty much everything is done in there, I think. So, yeah. All right. So, visit us at tristar.com, right? We have in our resource center, like there's all these webinar recordings, replays are available. You can visit tristar.com and you'll be able to watch them. We do webinars on many of our solutions that we support on, including Windchill, Creo Parametric, right, and also the custom solutions. So please feel free to reach out or contact us. You can also go to our YouTube channel, and that also has these webinar recordings in there. Or just feel free to let us know with any questions you may have at tristar.com or call us at 800-800-1714. Okay. So thank you all. Thanks for spending the time. I hope it was informative and useful. Until we see you in the next seminar, next webinar, you all have a great rest of the day and week. Thank you. Bye.